This red dot is yours?
Yes.
I will get you your clicker. Yeah, sure.
So, great pleasure to be here. It's so nice. I understand it's a bit smaller audience than with live stream, but that makes it much more intimate. And then when you go out there, you can say, I have seen that talk and others haven't. Thank you. So I don't think audience, do we? No. Do we have well, yeah. Oh, look at yeah, up and coming. Sure. Do you want me to give this one back, or is it okay? Okay. Do we have parents of adolescents? Okay, good. Do we have people who work with adolescents at schools, or? Okay, okay. Do we have people who remember well how it was to be an adolescent? Ah, great, great, great. Then we can get started. Okay, so there's this idea that nowadays there's something going on with today's youth that is a bit of a problem. They get into all this trouble and they steal and then they do rebellious things and then they get in trouble with their teachers and we don't really know how to deal with it. Today's youth seems to be a bit out of control. They're connected to hundreds of unknown others on the internet, and we don't really know how to control that. And it's a big discussion nowadays in the Netherlands. It was even in today's newspaper on the front page that how should we deal with these kids who don't listen in school? Should we maybe punish them earlier, heavier? Should we have stricter rules how to deal with that? If today's youth is out of control, what are we going to do about that? Well, then, if we go back a little bit in history, let me tell you a story. There was this young girl, 15-year-old girl, and this young guy, he was also 15 years old. And they met at a party. And they talked to each other, well, maybe 50 words or something, and they fell heavily in love. And then the next day they met each other again, and maybe they spoke a little bit more, but hardly haven't exchanged any ideas about what their future was going to be like or what kind of things they liked or disliked. They just saw each other and they were so attracted to each other and they only wanted to be together. Well, the parents thought it was not such a great idea, so they said no, but these kids didn't listen. They were rebellious against their parents, they got into fights, they were out of control. Well, this is the story that William Shakespeare wrote about, Romeo and Juliet, that we have known all for a very long time. And this was in the 15th century. If we go back to earlier days, the Greek philosophers, they already wrote about adolescents getting in trouble, they don't listen. What is going on with today's youth is a phrase from Greek philosophers. So if we think about it, maybe there's not something so specific going on with today's youth. Maybe it has to do with that this is a special phase in development that maybe brings risks and challenges, but maybe also many great opportunities. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So what is it that is so special about adolescents? What makes them so different from other phases in life? Well, there's absolutely an increase in risk-taking behavior. There's the need for sensation, the going out there, taking risks, and we see that this can sometimes get them into trouble. For example, there's the famous health paradox. The health paradox states that adolescents are physically in their most healthiest time of their life. Their cardiovascular system is very strong. They can show great sports achievements. They can be fantastic at the Olympics. Still, the mortality rate in adolescents goes up by 200% to 300%. This is not because their body fails. It is because they get into accidents. Accidents caused by risk-taking behavior. A second thing that is very well known about adolescence is that there's this increase in social fears. So the sensitivity for social negative rejection. So the idea that if you're on an audience and all these people may dislike you, what are you going to do? So there's this public speaking anxiety that increases during adolescence. There's also the time when there's much more focus on what your peers find important. So no longer do adolescents spend a lot of time with their parents. Their focus shifts towards spending time with their peers. The norms of the peers become very important, more important than the norms of the parents or the norms of society. There's also an increase in caring for other people, and this has to do with an increase in the ability to take other people's perspectives. And then, last but not least, it is the first time that children or adolescents explore what is going on in the field of romance. And I don't know if you still remember, but I definitely do, that this causes very intense emotions. I won't talk about it too much with my husband here on the first level, but okay. So we talk about adolescence, and then we know that there's all these special transitions. And then sometimes when I give these talks at elementary schools, then these parents are so excited about this whole change that's going to happen, and they ask me, "Oh, when does it start? It sounds so exciting." And then when I give talks at high schools, then the parents usually ask me, when does it end? Let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's go into a little bit more detail about what it is that starts in adolescence and what ends in adolescence. So we define adolescence as the process or the trajectory of growing into adulthood. It's the time between childhood and adulthood, and it is a process that takes a couple of years. There have been many anthropological studies that have shown that this phase of adolescence is present across cultures, also in non-industrialized cultures. So adolescence is present in all societies. The difference is that the length, the time of the adolescence differs across cultures. So the starting point of adolescence is puberty. And puberty starts approximately around the age of 9, 10, and lasts until about ages of 14, 15. And the most important part about puberty is that it causes all these changes in hormone systems. And we see that children change in their physical appearance. Girls get hips and breasts, and boys get lower voice. So we know very well all these changes that go on during puberty. And it used to be the idea that this was what caused all this silly behavior of adolescence. But we also all know that by the age of 14 or 15, you're not yet an adult. And puberty ends approximately by the age of 14, 15. So the second stage is adolescence. Puberty is actually part of adolescence. It's the starting point of adolescence, but adolescence lasts much longer. Now, what is the end phase of adolescence? This is not such an easy question to answer. The end phase of adolescence is when we think that someone is an adult. Now, we know in the United States you can drive a car when you're 16, but you can drink alcohol when you're 21. And in the Netherlands, you can vote when you're 18, but 100 years ago, you could not vote until you were 21. So there's differences in cultures and times when we say that the end point of adolescence is reached and when you are an adult. Now, here is where brain research comes in and can give us new insights into how adolescents develop over time. This is not to say that we should blame the brain for everything, that we can just say, well, they can't help it, their brain is not yet mature. That is not the point that I want to make. I want to make the point that if we examine brain development, if we know more about how the brain develops and functions over time, we can get a new level, a deeper level of explanations of all these things that adolescents are doing. And the way we do that is by making use of brain imaging techniques, mostly MRI and functional MRI. Now, what you see here is a picture from my own lab with a 10-year-old boy going into the MRI scanner. And the great thing about MRI is that it is non-invasive, so there's nothing attached to him. It is a safe and non-invasive technique that we can use to understand what the brain looks like and how it works. On the one hand, we can examine what the structure is from the brain, what it looks like. But on the other hand, we can ask these children to perform certain tasks in the scanner. And as you can see, with a little mirror, they can look outside. And with a button, they can make choices. So we can ask them all kinds of things and then make pictures of their brain while they're making all these decisions. And these can be things related to math or science or reading, but it can also be gambling. We make them play all kinds of casino games, social interactions. We can ask them questions about morality, about relations. So we get a new level of explanation by seeing which parts of the brain use a lot of oxygen when they make these decisions. So the brain has approximately billions of neurons, many of neurons. And these neurons, they work in a certain way that the main part of the neuron is the gray matter. And the endpoints of the neuron are the white matter. Now the gray matter is very important because it has all the action. And the white matter is important for sending signals to other parts in the brain. Now this gray matter has a very interesting developmental pattern. The thing is with the gray matter is that it develops over time, but in such a way that there's first an overproduction of gray matter cells. By the age of 6, our brains are probably most filled with gray matter. Then a second process starts, which we call pruning. And pruning means that certain parts of the gray matter get eliminated. So there's first an overproduction, and then an elimination of unnecessary neurons. You can think about it as if you're walking through a forest, and there's all these little paths. And the path that you take all the time, it gets bigger and becomes a road, a highway maybe over time, and the other paths that you don't take anymore, they fade away. But think about the potential of all these paths that are still in there when you're very young. This is something sometimes a bit confronting for adults to hear, but if we think about it, we have so much experience, and our brain gets shaped towards making very fast decisions that are usually pretty smart. But at the same time, we lose a sense of creativity. We lose a sense of out-of-the-box thinking that children and adolescents still have. There are ideas that you can train that, but I don't know if that's really true. So if we think about this overproduction and elimination of neurons, what does that tell us about how the brain works in adolescence? Now, if we take the full picture, what we know is that this overproduction and elimination of neurons is slowest in those parts of the brain that are important for rational thinking and social reasoning. So those areas of the brain that are important for all the things that make us, as we think as adults, smart and wise and controlled, are those regions that are developing most slowly, not in a way that adolescents have a hole in the brain and cannot use it. No, it's the other way around. They have an overproduction of gray matter cells that have not yet taken these efficient paths, but that may have enormous possibilities. The second thing that happens is that with the onset of puberty, certain deeper levels of the brain, so the parts of the brain that are evolutionary, very old, get extra stimulation. These hormones affect the regions that are circled here in the brain in red. And those regions are important for risk-taking, reward processing, deciding who you find attractive or not, the nice feeling of being included in a social group, and the uneasy and painful feeling of being socially excluded. All these very basic emotions are processed in those areas of the brain that are circled here in red. Those areas of the brain are full of receptors for hormones. So you may notice if you have hormone fluctuations over time. Now, if you have noticed this as an adult, think about it, that this change in hormones in puberty are many times larger than what we experience as adults over time. So if you feel happy or sad sometimes, this may be related to fluctuations in hormones. In puberty, this is much more intensified. So these regions of the brain become stimulated by these hormones, and then we have these other regions of the brain that have still the flexibility of developing in different paths. Now, where does this bring us? When we have kids in the laboratory, it is not so easy to get them into this state where we want to examine that risk-taking behavior. Because as a parent, when you ask a child to sit at the kitchen table and explain what he's going to do during the vacation in Spain, that child can very well explain that he's not going to do stupid things and that he knows what is risky. But when he's in that bar in Spain, that is when these systems get triggered. Now, the nice thing about our new research methods is that, and this is what I'm trying to explain by a new level of explanation, is that we can have these kids participate in our studies, do all kinds of games and tasks, and we can examine how these different parts of the brain work together and what that tells us. Now, my main conclusion is that, based on this research, that on the one hand, we have learned a lot about risks and sensitivities. If we think about that health paradox, and we think about how much more risks these kids take, then this is something to be aware of, that we know that the brain is still developing, and this is new information. The brain has the average size of an adult by the age of 9. For a long time, we thought that brain development ended by that time, and that it was all a bunch of raging hormones that did stupid things, but that if these kids would just listen well, then we would explain them how they should behave. We now know that this is not true. We know that this brain development goes on much longer, until the early 20s. And what does that tell us about how we should think about when these kids get in trouble? The second thing I want to give to you today in terms of new idea is that 80% of these kids go through puberty without any problems. We all the time seem to think that all these kids are out of control, but this is not true. Most of the children go through puberty well, they talk to the parents, but they have risk factors. These kids also have great opportunities for learning, for developing passions, for creativity. I think the next TED event should be filled only with adolescents who can give their ideas and their out-of-the-box thinking on all these problems that we're today talking about. So we don't only talk about adolescents in terms of sensitivities and risks, but also, this is going to be the interesting cliffhanger if the battery is going to make it. Well, it's going to be exciting. Here we go. It is also a time of great chances and opportunities. Think about what is being said in the newspapers, how we should think about adolescents, how we should treat them. Should we punish them harder? Should we put them in prison at a younger age? Or should we cherish this time in development and give them opportunities for early intervention and guide them towards the future? I have a 3-year-old who is also here in Amsterdam today with me and my husband. We spent the time at the hotel yesterday, and I took my daughter to the speakers' dinner, which was okay from about 6 to 7, but then she gave up, and then she started to make a big party. So we couldn't stay there during the whole evening, but it was just so great to be there with her. Today, her grandmother is taking her all kinds of places and taking care of her. It is so clear that these 3-year-olds, they need us, and we help them. But these kids, they need us as well. Thank you for your attention.